Good evening. Good Saturday evening. This is Shindo. Always here. Always here. Give you breaking news. Big news. U.S. troops have done a little whoopsie here. Big whoopsie. In Syria, according to the BBC News. This is the headline. BBC News. I will leave a link to this in the description box, as always. Syria conflict. U.S. airstrikes, quote, killed dozens of government troops, unquote. The U.S.-led coalition has admitted its planes carried out an attack in eastern Syria that the Russian army says killed at least 62 Syrian troops fighting ISIS. The U.S. said its planes had halted the attack in Deir al-Zor when informed of the Syrian presence. A spokesman for the U.S. administration expressed, quote, regret for the, quote, unintentional loss of life, unquote. An emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, having a lot of those lately, convened by Russia, is discussing the crisis. The Russians earlier said the current ceasefire in Syria was in danger of collapsing, and the U.S. would be to blame. The cessation of hostilities does not include attacks by the U.S. on ISIS or other jihadist groups. The U.S. Central Command statement said the coalition believed it was attacking positions of so-called Islamic State, and the raids were, quote, halted immediately when coalition officials were informed by Russian officials that it was possible the personnel and vehicles targeted were part of the Syrian military, unquote. It said, quote, Combined Air Operations Center had earlier informed Russian counterparts of the upcoming strike, unquote. It added, quote, Syria is a complex situation with various military forces and militias in close proximity, but coalition forces would not intentionally strike a known Syrian military unit. The coalition will review this strike and the circumstances surrounding it to see if any lessons can be learned, unquote. Russia's defense ministry earlier said the U.S. airstrikes did turn out to be in error. It would be because of Washington's refusal to coordinate military action with Moscow. Only if the current ceasefire, which began on Monday, holds for 7 days, will the U.S. and Russia begin coordinated action against the Jabhat Fatah al-Sham group, which was previously known as al-Nusra Front and ISIS. The Russian defense military quoted a statement by Syrian Army General Command as saying that the 4 coalition airstrikes on Syrian troops had allowed ISIS to advance. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the attack had jeopardized the U.S.-Russia agreement in Syria. The Syrian statement said that the airstrikes were, quote, conclusive evidence, unquote, that the U.S. and its allies supported the jihadist group. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Monitoring Group put the death toll at least 80. There has been no confirmed case of U.S. airstrikes targeting Syrian troops. Last December, Syria accused the coalition of attacking a government army camp in Deir al-Zor, but the U.S. denied it. Repeated messages. Earlier, Russia's military expressed fears for the ceasefire. It said rebel groups had increased attacks and it urged U.S. to act or be responsible for the collapse of the truce. Russian General Vladimir Shavkatko said the situation in Syria is worsening, with 55 rebel attacks over the past 24 hours, leading to the death of 12 civilians. General Viktor Pozniker said Russia, an ally of the Syrian government, was doing all it could to rein in Syrian troops. Quote, If the American side does not take the necessary measures to carry out its obligations, a breakthrough of the ceasefire will be on the United a breakdown of the ceasefire will be on the United States, unquote, he said. Quote, the United States and so-called moderate groups they control have not met a single obligation they assumed in the framework of the Geneva Agreement. Unquote. The terms require moderate rebel groups to separate themselves from jihadists. General Posnetsker said, quote, our repeated messages to the American side are left without a response. There is doubt the U.S. is able to influence the moderate opposition they control, unquote. A U.S. National Security Council spokesman later said, quote, while there have been challenges on both sides, violence is considerably lower and the cessation is broadly holding. Quote, what we've not seen is a humanitarian aid getting through and will be hard to build confidence on the ground until that occurs, unquote. Some 20 trucks has been waiting since Monday for safe passage from Turkey into Syria and on the rebel-held East Aleppo. Truce days may be numbered, BBC James Longman, Beirut. This was meant to be a trust-building exercise, but nearly a week after the truce began, the blame game has begun. There was deep skepticism from the rebels about details in the plan, which called for their separation from extremist groups. That is why they never formally accepted the deal. It was always a major sticking point. Were U.S.-backed groups supposed to surrender territory to Jabhat Falim al-Shalom, or were they required to fight them? It was never clear. Either way, the stipulation would leave them far weaker in the battlefield, but refusing and standing in the way of much-needed humanitarian aid would not have been popular. Now, this weekend, the main rebel groups are due to meet and discuss their position. The mistrust of government and the Russian allies runs deep. They see that the obstruction of aid deliveries on the border as a stalling tactic, and one which they have seen before. If aid doesn't reach besieged areas soon, the ceasefire days are numbered, and coordinate strikes against ISIS won't happen. Well, let's assume this is a mistake. This is a mistake that killed at least 80 troops, Syrian troops. Let's assume it was a mistake. It doesn't really matter if it was a mistake or not, because let's look at the number of different huge factors involved with this. Number one, the ceasefire is all but destroyed, which is no surprise at all to anyone. Number two, both Russia and Syria can now use this as using the United States as a fall guy in the region and making the United States look like, well, bad guys. And also, Syria can use this to make the United States look like they're backing ISIS, which, honestly, let's be honest, by the way that this administration has tried to fight ISIS, I'm absolutely certain myself that they had no intention of fighting and killing ISIS fighters. They had no intention of trying to stop ISIS. If they did, ISIS would have been stopped by now, because we're talking about maybe a couple 100,000 people all over the world in that region. They don't have the numbers that the United States could put into that region and just blow them off the face of the earth. Basically, we got ourselves into a huge mess, that will be one of the many different factors that will lead to what it is that the powers that be want, and that is world war. This is Shindo. Please like, comment, and share and subscribe if you like these kind of videos, because I'm always here. When there's breaking news, I believe it's important, I will do it in the middle of the night. So, there you go. This is Shindo. Have a good Saturday evening.